And there we are. And here we are. Okay, so yesterday we just learned the Shaila. What's the Shaila? We have our Chevra has this nice little minion of B'nai Torah, of guys who were learning in Kollel, and the Gabbai had the chutzpah to move out of town. So now we're left without a Gabbai, and we drew straws, we drew lots to see who was going to be the new Gabbai. And lo and behold, it fell onto Yankel Schmerel. And now Yankel Schmerel says, I don't want to do it. Does he allowed to, and he claims that he's not obligated to the terms of the lottery because there was never a Kenyan. It was just a game for him. So is he allowed to retract or not? So we asked around the table. Some people, we recognize that he's not a nice fellow, but does he have a right to withdraw or not? Matzanu b'Torah shegoral hu davar shemachayev. So Reb Sharaga says something really interesting. He says the Torah itself indicates to us that a lottery is creates an obligatory status. K'mosha haGemara omeret b'Sanhedrin b'shah she'amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'Moshe esfali shivim ish meziknei Yisrael. Remember, in Parshas Bahaloscha, there was this situation where Hashem told Moshe says, "I can't handle these people anymore." Right? Basically, no, he said, "I can't handle these people. I don't want to. I don't want to be their leader. They're kvetching constantly, and they're complaining they want meat, and that's not. I'm not cut out for that." So Hashem says, "Fine. Esfali shivim ish miziknei Yisrael. Gather for me 70 men who are elders who can help you in the job." And Omar Moshe Rabbeinu, Eichani Yachol Les of Shivimish. And Moshe says, how's that going to work for me to get 70 people? It's not divisible by 12. Imani Akach Mikol Shevet Vashevet Shisha Yushivim Ushnayim. He says, if I take 6 men from each tribe, well, 6 times 12 is 72. Vim Ekach Mikol Shevet Chamisha Yushishim. And if I take only 5 from each Shevet, that's going to only end up with 60. So how do I get an even 70 and have an even number of men from each shevet? And don't tell me to take from some tribes 6 and from some tribes 5, because that's going to create jealousy. Lachein Moshe birer shisha mikol shevet ve'asa goral v'hashivim shezachu nivcharu. So what did Moshe decide to do? He chose 6 men from each tribe who were fit to be members of this new Sanhedrin that he was assembling. And he basically wrote their names down, each one on a piece of parchment or paper. And he basically said, we're going to take lots, and whichever one of these, the first 70 will be the ones who are chosen. Okay? V'chein matzanu b'Sanhedrin b'masa im achan. Now, we also find a similar story in the Gemara in Sanhedrin later on. By the way, you should have had this story. It's on Sanhedrin Yud Zayin. What daf are you on, the daf yomi? So you probably just had this recently, this story. Okay. And we also find in Sanhedrin the story with Achan, who was a person who was put to death because he took spoils from the war where Hashem said, do not take spoils. Sha'amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu li Yehoshua chata Yisrael. So Hashem told Yehoshua, Israel has sinned, meaning one of you has sinned, but it's placed on all of Klal Yisrael. Amar lo Yehoshua mi chata. So Yehoshua said, who's the sinner? So Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'chi diltor ani. Hashem said, you think I'm a gossip? I'm going to tell you Lashon Hara. Al Kain Hipel Yehoshua Goralos V'nafal Hagoral Al Achan. So Yehoshua took a lottery and put different names of people who had participated in the war, and he pulled out Achan's name, and that's how he knew that Achan was the criminal. Amar lo Yehoshua Al Totzi Laz Al Hagoralos Sha'asida Eretz Yisrael Shetischalek begorel. And Hashem said to Yehoshua, I think it's what it is, do not disparage lotteries, because the land of Israel will be divided by lottery. And that's also what we read in the Torah, that the Torah says that when you split up Eretz Yisrael, al pi hagorel, it has to be done by lottery. V'chein matzanu ba'od kama mekomos b'talmud shayu mitilim gorelos v'hayu nohagim al pi hagorel. And we find many places in the Talmud that that's how they used to distribute privileges or rights or ownership of things, is that they would make a lottery. Because of Hachavos Yoyer, and by the way, it's because it's based on the belief that Hashem is guiding the lottery.
Right, it's not chance.
It's not, well, yeah, that's the point.
Yeah.
Because of Hachavos Yoyer, Shim Hagorel Kahogen, the lo yihiya bo shum ta'us, tistabik bo yad hashgacha helyona mi'ashamayim. And the Chavos Yoyer himself, I think he's from the 17th or 18th century, he writes that if a lottery is done properly, in other words, there's no kind of hanky-panky and no mistakes are made, then the hashgacha, God's divine providence, rests over the lottery to determine the winner. Upashut, or the loser. Upashut shetzrichim lasos al pi hagorel. And therefore, you should always use lotteries if you don't know how else to designate somebody. V'chein hayanohug mikadmas dana bekama b'kamakomos. And that's what was done in many places in the old days. Livcha rav al pi hagorel. They would choose the new rabbi using lottery, which is a pretty cool system, right? Shahayu bocharim.
Skill and ability.
Nah, no rabbi has skill and ability. Shahayu bocharim es hamu'amadim hamat'idim. They would choose the best candidates. Umisha hayazoche hayamit rav kol yemei chayav. And whoever won the lottery would be assigned the rabbi for life. I can't think of a worse punishment. Ve'ein potza ba umitzavtzev. And no one would protest. No one would criticize this. This was done, and it was basically, and he says in the footnote, "V'chein kasuf b'sefer toldos sofrim, shekain haya haminhag b'Hungaria ayin sham." Sefer toldos sofrim. I don't know what year that's from. Right, so that was the minhag in Hungary when they wanted to choose a rav.
But all these rabbis want to become rabbi.
Yeah, presumably so.
Okay, but another case that nobody wants to be the guy.
Nobody wants to be the guy.
It's not a good comparison.
Who wants to be a rabbi?
Yeah. V'chein omar lanu Rabbeinu Hagon HaMachaber Shlita sheshama mehagon Rav Yehuda Tzedakah Zatzal sheshamar mehagon Rav Ezra Etia or Atia Zatzal sheharishon l'tzion kemoharar Moshe Levi Zatzal nivcha al yedei Hagorel. That there was one, I guess, Sephardic chief rabbi that was also selected by lottery. This must have been many years ago. I don't know who Moshe Halevi was, but it was probably one of the earlier Rishon LeZion chief rabbis. Ule'inyan. Now, what about the this young man's complaint or his claim that he's not bound to the lottery? Ule'inyan mashatoin havrich dekivin shu lo asakinyan haskama shelo havi kedvarim ba'alma. What about his argument that there was never a kinyan? He never indebted himself legally to the outcome of the lottery. So why should he have to be bound to it? So he says,
acquiesced.
well, he said, fine, let's do a lottery.
Right. So
but he never made a kinyan. There was never a legal obligation that he made there was never a legal transaction to obligate himself to the terms of this lottery. Hine ha-Gemara omeres b'maseches bava basra. So to respond to that, there's a Gemara that says as follows: Rabbi Yossi Omer ha'achim shecholku kevin she'olagoro le'echad mehem kanu kulam. That if a group of brothers choose to divide the property of an estate, and they have to take they're drawing lots to see who gets the north side, who gets the south side, etc. Once one brother wins the lottery for his portion, then all of them acquire automatically their respective portions. Now, what does that mean? In other words, I guess it's an automatic process Ravashi explains "Nahainu mishum sheba'osa hahana'a shekulam shomim ze lazeh." The fact that each one was willing to participate in the lottery, maknim echad l'sheni kidei shelo yihiya od ikov bedavar. Then there's an automatic assumption. You see, before partners split property, every single molecule of the land belongs to all of the partners. Once I take my share, not only do I acquire all of the molecules in my share, but I relinquish all of the molecules in everywhere else on the property. It's an automatic process. So once let's say you have two brothers, once one brother's lottery comes out for the north side, he immediately relinquishes the south side, and no kinyan is necessary. Okay, so because the benefit that he gets from the benefit that the brothers get from acquiescing to each other, then there's an automatic kinyan that's implicit, right? V'chein pasuk harambam ha'achin shecholku va'asu b'neihem gorol. The Rambam paskins this way. He says when two brothers split an estate and they do it by lottery, okay. Kevin sha'ola hagorol le'echad mehem kanu kulam bahana shenasis lehem sheshamu zemizeh lidavar shehiskimu alav gomar kol echad mehem umakne lechavero. Then all of the other brothers acquire their portion automatically. In other words, it's an automatic exchange that takes place that's implicit. There's no need for a kinyan because the fact that everyone is agreeable to the lottery is in itself a method of relinquishing what they own in the other's portion and an acquisition of what is coming to them for their portion. V'chein pasuk morin b'shulchan aruch im cholku b'gorol la'achar sha'ar Allah hagorol le'echad mehem niskayma ha'chaluka l'kulam. And that's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins as well. Ulam harama sham pasak keshita sarash shahagorol rak mivarer et hachalakim v'lo mehaveh kinyan. However, the Rama disagrees. The Rama says that when you take a lottery, it doesn't automatically transfer ownership. What a lottery simply does is it demonstrates or it clarifies who is destined to acquire which portion of the property. It doesn't actually consummate a transaction. All it does is designate how the transaction will transpire in a moment. Okay, so therefore,
then you have to act.
and then you have to actually make a kinyan. You have to actually make a transaction with all of the brothers participating in that transaction, where each party relinquishes his ownership of the others and makes a kinyan on his property. So it seems that this is the machlokes between the Mechaber and the Rama. Mechaber goes like the Rambam, who says that the lottery itself affects a kinyan. So therefore, according to the Mechaber, you would not be allowed to, once the lottery is done, you can't back out. And according to the Rama, you would be allowed to back out. It's a long footnote. Aval kvar kasav harash the minhag pashadhu shema shetove hakohol maskimim laso sharir v'kayam hu below kinyan. However, the Rush also writes, the same Rush that the Rama quoted, says that it has already become established custom that the leaders of the congregation all agree that when a lottery is taken, it becomes sharir v'kayam. It becomes permanent and established. That's the agreed upon division, even without making a formal kinyan. That if something is agreed upon by the community leaders, then you don't need to make a kinyan. Once you have consensus among the community sort of heads, then no kinyan is necessary to effectuate what they've decided, what they've come to consensus. V'chol takanos hakol shemitaknin al hayechidim v'al rabim kiksuvin v'chimesurin dami, that any kind of rules that they create do not have to be imposed formally upon the congregation. All they need to do is make a public pronouncement, and it's as if they've been written and delivered to each and every member of the community. The imkain, and therefore, according to that, af lefi das harama she'ein hagorol mechayvo, that even according to the Rama, who says that a lottery is not binding for the division of partners, but there's another reason why when the group makes a lottery among themselves, they represent the heads of their small little community. They have a minyan, right? So that minyan is a micro community, right? They may only have 15 families in the whole minyan, but these 15 families have a point. These 5 guys, let's say, are in charge of this little minyan. So this micro community has the community heads, and you 5 guys are the community heads. So once you come to a consensus that we're going to draw a lottery to determine who's the next gabbai, that becomes legally binding even without a kinyan. And therefore, that means that this fellow who drew the short straw is legally obligated to be the gabbai. Sorry, you can't back out.
Guess he could have backed up before the lottery.
He could have said, I'm not participating in the lottery, I refuse, and I'm resigning. He could have resigned at that point. Now, he could also choose to leave the community, just like the other gabbai. But if he still wants to daven in that minyan,
Right.
he's got to do it as the gabbai.
And if something comes up in his life that alters the fact that he wouldn't be able to do it, how far does this obligation go?
That's a good question. I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, obviously situations change and he may have to resign. He says, he actually says that Rav Ovadia has a very long tshuva on this topic. So let's take a look first of all at the footnote from the Makor Baruch.
Of course, he could do a very poor job, so they wanted.
Yeah, right. That's like, what is that called? Where you work a minimum amount to force them to fire you. That's not constructive dismissal. It's work to what?
That's what they do when they strike. They just
take over by.
You do the very minimum just to get to do the job.
instead of striking, sometimes I'll do that.
Pass it.
The rule?
Work to rule. Yeah, okay.
But I mean, it's almost like the joke about the husband when he first gets home, breaks a few dishes, so the wife says, "You're never doing the dishes." Right, so. They won't want him to do it. He always picks the same person for the Aliyah and then they'll say.
Yeah,
just
or he picks the worst guy for to lean the haftarah. Okay. All right. Ayin, or to lead the davening. Ayin l'Rabbeinu Hagadol Zatzal b'shut Yabia Omer Shadan b'she'ela. So we refer you to Rav Ovadia's Sefer Yabia Omer. He has the following shaila: Be'ir sha'amdu libchor es Rav ha'ir shalahem al yedei guf bocher Shemana Shloshim v'shisha ish. So this community has a board, and the board has 36 people on it, and they're in charge of deciding who the next rabbi is going to be. Uvihiyot shahayu shnei talmidei chachamim mu'amadim lemishrazu v'nechleku hakolos. So there were 2 candidates, and there was a big dispute as to which candidate should become the new rav. Ba'ofen shekol echad mehamu amadim kibel yudchet kolot. So each candidate got 18 votes out of this body of 36. In other words, it was a completely split board. So hechalit haguf habocher al das atzmo lahatil goral. So the board decided we'll do a lottery, okay? Because they couldn't. They had a deadlock. V'zacha echad mehatalmidei chachamim begoral. And so, okay, so the one candidate won the lottery. And the other candidate says, you can't rely on a lottery. And he says, I demand that you vote on it and come to a decision. And a number of the board members support that guy because he was their guy. Okay. So v'hisik sham she'im lagorol tokef midin Torah mishnei ta'amim. And there, Rav Ovadia says that you don't follow the lottery, and the guy has a valid claim. And yet there's two reasons why, in this case, you can't rely on the lottery. Aleph, dechol hasiba de goral mahani, humidin de behahi hana de katsaisi lahadadi gamri umakni hadadi kidisa bebava vasra. He says the whole reason why a lottery helps is because the parties, because they all benefit by coming to consensus that they're going to split using a lottery. So with that benefit that they know that they will all cooperate, that's how the transaction comes to fruition. He says, and in this particular situation, not all the board agreed to the idea of a lottery. In other words, I guess the majority of the 36 members of the board agreed to have a lottery, but it was like 20 against 16 who said, well, we're okay with the lottery. And the other 16 says, no, we don't want a lottery. We want to hash this out until we come to a decision. Like the movie 12 Angry Men. Okay, Bays. Od Kasav Sham, Dafilu Bichi Hagavna Shaharabanim Hiskimu Mitchila Lasot Goral. And he further writes that even when the candidates themselves agree to a lottery, I think what he's saying is the candidates did not agree to a lottery. I think that's what he's saying also. He's saying the candidates did not agree to a lottery. And so therefore they don't relinquish their rights to be a candidate. Now, the second argument Rav Ovadia makes is that even in a situation where the two candidates agreed to a lottery, he says a lottery only helps when all stakeholders are participating in the lottery. And the lottery, therefore, is just designating how the division of all the stakeholders will take place. But here, this is not a division of assets. This is deciding who's going to become the new rabbi, who's going to get the new position of Rav. And therefore, it's not like you have stakeholders in the ownership of the rabbi, and we're going to decide which one are we acquiring and which one are we relinquishing. It's not working that way because he's an employee. He's not your property. And therefore, it doesn't, when you have two candidates and you want to create a position of rabbi as the leader of the community, that type of lottery does not consummate a transaction, a legally binding transaction. So that's how Rav Ovadia understands. He says a lottery for selecting the Rav is not legally binding. And furthermore, the Sefer Nachal Yitzchak says the same thing, that a lottery will not help in a situation where one party profits and the other party loses. The chol mashematzinu shegoral mahani yahavidavka ba'achim sherotzim lachalok b'Yerusha ve'ein af echad mehem mafsid al yedei hagoral ela shemevarim et chelkam al yedei hagoral. The only time that the Gemara says that a lottery is legally binding is when no one loses. It's just a question of designating the division of the property, who is going to get the north property, who's going to get the south property, and etc., where no one's losing. But here, where there's a loser and a winner, A lottery is not legally binding. Let's say in the division of an estate, there are two qualities of property. Let's say the north side has the higher value property, and the south side has the lower value property. There, a lottery does not work in the Gemara. It only works if the two properties are of equal value. Okay, and therefore, v'tola din zeh b'machlokas hataz v'hatvuo shar ayin sham. V'zeu siba nosefes amaya gorol b'sheila hanal b'bechinas rav ha'ir lo mahani kevin shechad mehem mafsid. And that's another reason why a lottery will not work where there's going to be a winner and a loser. So lotteries are only legally binding according to the Gemara where everyone is a winner. But if there's a winner and a loser, a lottery doesn't help. So this becomes problematic for our case.
Loser, the
guy,
total loser.
Yeah, right. His name might be the loser. Okay, ve'ein lahakshos al zeh b'masha Moshe Rabbeinu bachar dayanim l'sanhedrin al yidei goro k'moshe kosav Rabbeinu hagon ha'machaber shlita le'el. What about the fact that Moshe did a lottery where there were 70 winners and 2 losers? So isn't that a winner and a loser kind of situation? The Yeshlomar, the shiny hasam, the hayadei ha'urim v'tumim v'ruach hakodesh. He says you could say that was different because that was done through Ruach HaKodesh. It was done through the Urim V'Tumim, perhaps. Maybe the Kohen Gadol was present and they did a lottery through the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. So we don't know. There, it was maybe have been an exceptional situation. So then why is it over here? So therefore he says, L'chora b'nidon didan, afal pisha kol ha'avrechem hiskimu la'asot goral. And therefore, why not make the argument here as well? All the young men who are part of this minyan agreed to do a lottery. So on the one hand, you have the argument that the Shulchan Aruch brings that the fact that they all benefit from cooperating with each other and arriving at consensus, that in itself creates the transaction, the legally binding transaction. Mikol makom kevin debinidon didan hagoral makne davar chadash ki hagoral lo balavarer chelek shekvar haya shayach lekulam elalasos echad mehem gabai. It's a typo. Bezed davar shelo haya kaim lifnei hagoral. He says in our case, you're creating a new entity. Who's going to be the new gabai? It's not a division of assets. So there's clearly a winner and a loser. And therefore we should say that a lottery is not binding. And furthermore, and clearly where there's going to be a loser here. So it's 2 arguments. Number one, you're creating a new position, and a lottery does not help to create a new position like to decide who's going to be the rabbi. And number 2, it doesn't work where there's going to be a winner and a loser. So why does it work here? Umikol makom lefi ma shehisik Rabbeinu agon hamachaber shlita sheyesh lahachalata sam tokev kamo shel takanas hakol shemechayeves lo yuchal hagabay shezacha begoro lachzer bo mikoach takanas hakol. But Rav Sharaga's final argument is, regardless of whether a lottery would normally work or not, here it does work because once the community leaders come to a decision, they don't need to have a formal kinyan in order to make their edict or their pronouncement legally binding. Okay, so
coming into Eretz Yisrael, when they had the girl also, I mean, some people got better area. Listen, I would like to have Shevet Binyamin where the base of English is going to be built.
right.
There's better.
Yeah. Even in Israel today, they do lotteries
for houses.
For housing. Okay, we'll hold it here for today. Maybe we'll continue this discussion tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.